Before we started filming, the following steps were taken. Material was placed in the appropriate reservoirs, the air hoses have been attached and the run pressure has been set, and all valves are in the correct position to dispense. Remove the shipping tape from the top and the bottom of the desiccant tube, allowing air to pass through the tube. Do not put the static mixer on the manifold until all air has been completely purged from the hose. Purge the hoses and the manifold to get all of the air out. Air is compressible, and any air in either the resin or the hardener can cause a soft spot in your mix material. When purging, it is recommended that you use separation tubes to separate the material into different containers so you can put the material you pump through back into the reservoirs if it's still clean. To purge the hoses, stretch them out so that they rise smoothly with no big dips or rises so the air bubbles are able to escape. Cycle the machine without a static mixer on the manifold until both materials are being dispensed. Continue until there are no air bubbles in either material, which should take 10 to 15 full strokes. Before you begin the timing process, it is helpful to understand how the machine functions. When the arm is in the resting position, it will fill the pumps through the intake port. As the cylinder pulls the pivot arm forward, the pistons are being pushed towards their pump cylinders. When the pistons enter the pump cylinder, material from that pump begins dispensing. In order to achieve a good mix and a proper ratio, both pistons must enter their pump cylinders at the same time. If the pistons do not enter at the same time, one material will be dispensing before the other, resulting in an incorrect ratio. After dispensing begins, the air cylinder will continue to pull the pivot arm forward until a full shot is delivered. The air cylinder will then push the pivot arm back, pulling the pistons back towards their intake position. As the pivot arm begins moving towards the out position, the check valves prevent material in the hoses from being drawn back into the pump. The air cylinder continues to push the pivot arm until it reaches its out position, at which point the pumps intake the material and the process is repeated. Before checking the timing, ensure that the check valve functions properly. This can be done by first pushing the operating arm in 3/4 of a full stroke. You can use a large screwdriver as leverage. At this point, there should be material coming out of both sides of the manifold. Pull the arm back to its starting position while watching the manifold to make sure that neither material gets sucked back into it. If the materials do not move, your check valve is functioning as it should. Starting with the operating arm all the way out and the manifold full of material, push the arm in until material is pumped out of the manifold. Both materials should start at the same time. You can see here that they didn't. If the cylinder side starts before the pivot side, retard the cylinder side pump. If the pivot side starts first, then advance the cylinder side pump. In order to retard or advance the left side pump, first loosen the bolt securing the pump to the frame. To retard the pump, turn the 3/4 inch hex head bolt under the check valve clockwise. To advance the left side pump, turn it counterclockwise. Tighten the pump mounting bolts on the back and check your timing again. You might need to adjust it more than once in order to get the timing exactly right, but it's important that you stick with it until it's perfect. Setting the right timing is essential for your material to cure correctly with no soft spots. Here, you can see what it would look like if your timing is set properly. Now it's time to check the ratio. To separate the materials at the gun, use the appropriate attachment for your gun. This attachment makes it possible to separate the two materials and weigh them independently of each other. There are a few different attachments, and it depends on which manifold you have. Be sure that both materials are flowing and that your manifold has material in it. Make sure that the material flows properly, then pump each material into a separate cup. A sample size of 2 to 3 full strokes is best in order to get rid of any abnormalities that could affect your calculations. Once you have pumped a sufficient sample size, weigh both materials to find the ratio. be sure to subtract the weight of the empty cups from your calculations. For more information on ratios, see your manual. To install the mixer, first disconnect the air supply. Smear some kind of petroleum grease, Vaseline works well, on the threads to keep them from getting gummed up. Slide the mixer on the nose of the manifold and then tighten the mixer nut. Be sure not to over-tighten the nut. Now, reconnect your air supply. It's time to purge the mixer. Purge about the volume of the mixer. This purged amount isn't mixed as well, so it won't be as strong. Here you can see the mixer in action. When you're done, remove the mixer and dispose of it. Then hang the gun over a trash can. Pump a small amount of material out of the manifold and wipe it off carefully. We do this to make sure all mixed material is purged and that there is no air trapped inside. Finally, put a small amount of grease, again, Vaseline works well, on the cap. Screw the cap onto the manifold to keep the air out. Remember not to over-tighten the cap. If you have any questions about the steps you just saw, or you'd like to know more, please contact us by phone, email, or check us out on the web.